Amid security unrest, governor of Aden escapes car bomb assassination attack. U.S. envoy Tim Litterking discusses in Riyadh Yemen crisis with European Union ambassadors. In continuation, further war on Yemenis, Houthi impose filing blockade on Abdiya in Ma'rib. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English News with me, Shazza Abdelbay. Starting from Aden, where the governor of Aden and the Minister of Agriculture survived a car bomb that targeted their convoy today. The car explosion killed at least 4 security and military members. Others were injured in the assassination attempt, including 3 civilians. One of them was a child. U.S. Embassy in Yemen condemned the failed assassination attack on the convoy of the governor of Aden and Minister of Agriculture. The U.S. chargé d'affaires in Yemen gave her sympathies to the families of the victims in this attack, and she stressed that these terrorist acts will not undermine Yemen and the international efforts to end the war. The assassination attempt was described by many circles as a in efforts of peace in Yemen. More on the story is within this report.
While all efforts of real Yemenis are concerned to reaching a political solution to the crisis in the country, a new attempt to destabilize Yemen more has occurred. An assassination attack targeted in the morning the convoy of the governor of Aden, who was accompanied by the Minister of Agriculture. The assassination attempt that rocked the interim capital Aden came after active and strenuous efforts made by the political circles in and outside the country to find a way for a ceasefire.
As you can see, this is the criminal, treacherous attack committed by those cowards who dare not face us in the battlefield, and they have committed such a cowardly act. If they were true men, they would combat us face to face and not follow such acts. Thanks God for the safety of Governor Al-Amlas, and we assure those cowards that such a crime will not go unpunished. All these attacks target nobody but innocent civilians, and the aim is terrorizing people. They only target civilians. This convoy was passing through a populated area, and since 2015, no terrorist incident has been taking place.
5 days ago, the envoy to Yemen was in Aden in his first visit, and he conducted a series of meetings with different parties that included officials in the government, the South Transitional Council, and the governor of Aden himself. The assassination attempt was denounced as a treacherous attack by the STC spokesperson. According to him, this attack was plotted after terrorist incitement made by the Muslim Brotherhood group that seeks to pave the way for Houthis to capture the liberated regions. STC spokesperson added that the failed attack on the governor of Aden and the Minister of Agriculture coincided with what he said a collapse in the battlefronts in Shabwa and Ma'rib, describing that as a joint conspiracy that targets the security in Aden, which called the importance to join forces to deter these plots in a more decisive manner.
The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim Litterking, held a meeting in Riyadh with ambassadors of the European Union, Germany, and Netherlands to Yemen. The meeting discussed joint forces led by the UN to support the peace process in Yemen and to ease the humanitarian situation in the country. Government forces backed by the tribes managed to break Houthi attacks south of Ma'rib. Military sources confirmed that the militia suffered heavy losses in lives and equipment. The sources confirmed that dozens of Houthi have been killed during those clashes. Still in Ma'rib, more than 16 Houthi militants have been killed after the government forces managed to deter an attack in the west of the city. A field military source stated that the rebels tried to infiltrate some military sites, but their attempt failed. The terrorist Houthi militia continues its sophisticated siege of citizens in Abdiya area in Ma'rib. The siege is being in place despite several appeals made to the international community and humanitarian organizations as to play their role in protecting civilians. More on the story is within this report.
Houthi siege on Abdea has been ongoing for about 3 weeks. Rebels are trying by all means to subjugate 35,000 of the population in Abdea in order to force their way for more control in Ma'rib, the strategic city. Abdea has been under heavy Houthi shelling, with ballistic missiles targeting populated areas randomly. Abdea was also a scene for Houthi attempts to infiltrate into neighboring Guba. Rebels tried to penetrate the positions of the government forces to the west of Ma'rib. The situation in Abdea is terrible and alarming. 5,300 families in Abdea are without food, water or medicine. They are blocked by the Houthi siege as well from access to these life-sustaining materials. According to reports, those families that make up about 35,000 of civilians are forced into drinking contaminated water. Reports add that no less than 9,000 children are there under siege. Those children are subject and already are suffering from malnutrition. Women in Abdea need help too. Hundreds of women need medical and health care. The 18 schools in the area stopped their work because of the Houthi blockade. The school year for more than 8,000 students is disrupted and the teachers are suffering as they are the breadwinners of their families. The international community should act to force the rebels into open, safe passages for thousands of civilians under siege. Former circles in Yemen have expressed their surprise for the international silence in face of this Houthi genocide against civilians and internally displaced people in Abdea. Yemeni former circles accused rebels of indiscriminate targeting of civilians in Abdea by different types of weapons and circling them within a stifling blockade while preventing any access to food, medicine or the milk for children. This Houthi violation of human basic rights, according to experts, will drive the Yemeni crisis into a slippery slope for more tension and conflict, away from the prospects of reaching any political solution for the 7-year ordeal.
Houthi militia continues to target civilian areas, especially in Al-Baida, Shabwa and Ma'rib. This has caused new large waves of displacement among people to other neighboring cities. More on the story is within this report.
The Houthi militia prevented the displacement of hundreds of families from Al Juba district south of Ma'rib, where confrontations are taking place with government forces. The Executive Unit for the Management of IDP Camps directed a distress call to the United Nations and human rights organizations to take a serious stance towards the unarmed civilians in the districts of Ain, Bayhan, Usaylan, and Harib on the outskirts of Shabwa and Ma'rib, with the new wave of displacement caused by the militia opening a new front to fight there. The Executive Unit of Ma'rib said that a wave of displacement coming from the district as a result of the barbaric attack by the terrorist Houthi militia. It continues due to the continuation of the Houthi military escalation in the area and warned that this will lead to a large wave of displacement and multiply the suffering of civilians. The recent armed confrontations between the Yemeni government forces and the Houthi militia over the control of key areas in Al-Baida displaced up to 1,535 families. The ongoing fighting forced the families to flee their houses in Al-Baida areas and seek for other safer places in the government-controlled southern province of Lahj. The Iranian-backed Houthi militia recently intensified their military operations against the government-controlled areas in different parts of the war-ravaged Arab country and succeeded in capturing key areas from the government forces that withdrew from their sites in Al-Baida and other cities in Yemen. According to what the unit said, the Houthi militia imposed a tight siege which is inhabited by more than 35,000 people and prevented the arrival of food and medicine supplies for the fourth consecutive day, which requires urgent UN intervention to lift that siege.
In Hodeidah, a woman was killed by Houthi fires. Further, the joint forces responded to the Houthi fire in two fronts south of the city. A military source said joint forces spotted sources of Houthi fire targeting residential villages in Al-Jah and the 16th Kilo areas east of Hodeidah and dealt with it instantly. Masan Project for Demining announced that it has removed 1,446 mines in Yemen during the first week of October. The project outlines that these explosives, including 30 anti-personnel mines and 110 anti-tank mines. This is in addition to the dismantling of 322 unexploded devices and a single explosive device. As the world marks the International Mental Health Day, Yemenis have been inflicted by the traumas and the calamities of this ongoing war. More on the story is within this report.
The war inflicted on Taiz by Houthi militias 7 years ago has left lasting physical and psychological effects on civilians of all ages. The lasting damage prompted the Center for Strategic and International Studies to openly show their support for women and children, who are generally considered the most vulnerable to the scares of war.
We went to displacement camps, we spoke to children, disabled and poor people. We understood their needs and the impact of war on them.
The center held its first meeting today on the World Mental Health Day under the slogan, "Mental health is our goal." The meeting featured a number of psychologists, including Arab specialists, presented a number of working papers that function as the roadmap for sustainable mental health improvement.
The symposium is the first of its kind. We look forward to establishing many counseling and psychological programs. We also look forward to opening a specialized psychological center in Taiz in order to provide integrated mental health services for all who have been affected by this ugly war.
The therapeutic efforts are done for children to stop future developments of mental disorders.
The meeting concluded with a thorough review of the center's efforts to provide psychological support to those affected by successive wars and disasters. On World Mental Health Day, psychologists work to address the psychological effects of war, with its devastating effects, especially on Taiz.
Coming next. In the time of war, Yemeni families force early marriage to escape poverty.
أقول لك راحت بالغداء لأهلها شلت الغداء وراحت بالأهلها في المزرعة. والمزرعة ركبت على حمار ما حتى نص المزرعة وانفجر فيها اللغم، دعست على اللغم وانفجر فيهم. الحمار انتهى الماء ترى تبقعت رجليها كامل. نغير منها نغير الشبعة اللي هي البنت سابحة من دور رجليها اللي صافناها طبية أقرب طبية وصافناها هي بطلت رجليها كامل.
قلت أزود هلي وقابل لي لعب وطبعت تحت الزواية.
Welcome back. The war and deteriorating economic situation have forced some families in Yemen to get their girls married at an early age to avoid poverty and hard living conditions. Yet such marriages have severe physical and psychological consequences on these young girls. More on the story is within this report.
Day after day, the war deepens Yemeni crisis, which have been exacerbated for years, and several strange social phenomena have spread. On top of these phenomena comes the marriage of minors, where young girls have turned overnight into divorcees, widows, and dependents, and the most dangerous is the death of some of them during childbirth. The phenomenon of underage marriage in Yemen is on the rise, as several reasons due to war have combined to reinforce it, such as displacement, families' need for money, and Houthis' encouragement of early marriage. Girls as young as 10 years old are abandoned by their families, and hundreds of girls in Yemen leave school as a result of early marriage. They are burdened with great responsibilities beyond their capabilities, not to mention the health damage they suffer. In addition, some of these girls are subjected to violence in different ways. According to the United Nations, 52% of Yemeni girls are married under the age of 18, and 14% of Yemeni girls are married before the age of 15. The prevalence of underage marriage in Yemen is 35% in cities and 70% in rural areas. Levels of violence against underage girls who are married have recently reached very high levels. The Sana'a-based Yemeni Women's Union stated that it receives about 60 calls a month regarding abusive husbands, most of which are from underage wives. The United Nations asserts that women in Yemen face severe discrimination in law and practice, as they cannot marry without the permission of a male guardian and do not enjoy equal rights to divorce, inheritance, or child custody. It stressed that the lack of legal protection exposed women to domestic and sexual violence, and noted that child marriage persisted in this country, which still had no minimum age for marriage. Underage marriage has finally become one of the marginal issues, and the focus has fallen back on major issues caused by the war ravaging the poor country, as hunger has threatened the lives of 13 million people, nearly half of the population, which made the United Nations issue warnings of the danger that the matter will turn into the worst famine in the world in a century. In order to reduce this phenomenon, the existence of a law that protects girls and childhood is needed. Also, concerned authorities should raise awareness to the families of the consequences of this marriage to their young girls.
The Yemeni journalist Suad Al-Salahi has won a Normandy Award for War Correspondence. She won the prize for her contribution to a report entitled City of Snipers. The report shows the suffering of Yemeni children in Taz. Lack of humanitarian fund has deprived millions of Yemenis from accessing basic health facilities and drinking clean water. More on the story is within this report.
The support of the Humanitarian Fund in Yemen keeps health and water facilities running. In late July, humanitarian agencies reported that fuel subsidies for health facilities, water plants, and sewage treatment facilities are at risk of being curtailed by severe funding shortfalls, threatening to prevent millions of people across Yemen from accessing basic health facilities and clean and safe drinking water. To mitigate these risks, the Humanitarian Coordinator launched on the 1st of August the first reserve allocation for 2021 to the Yemen Humanitarian Fund. Accordingly, $5.4 million has been allocated to UNICEF and the World Health Organization to ensure the continued operation of health facilities and vital water plants until at least December of this year. This funding was made available in just a few days, demonstrating the added value of the fund in providing timely and flexible funding to humanitarian partners as needs arise. This allocation will support UNICEF to ensure that 2.4 million people in 14 governorates have access to safe drinking water and adequate sewage treatment, which are essential to mitigate the widespread public health risks facing the country, including COVID-19 and exposure to cholera and other transmitted diseases through water, and high rates of malnutrition. In addition, the World Health Organization will be able to continue providing fuel to support essential health services, in particular trauma care and maternal and child health services, benefiting approximately 5 million people across 206 medical facilities in 20 governorates. Yemen remains the world's largest humanitarian crisis, where protracted conflict, widespread displacement, severe food insecurity, economic stagnation, the collapse of state institutions, and restrictive humanitarian access, coupled with natural hazards and the COVID-19 pandemic, have triggered extremely high levels of humanitarian and protection needs. More than 20 million people, who represent 2/3 of the population, need humanitarian assistance. However, despite such staggering needs, the Yemen Humanitarian Response Plan remains only around 50% funded. Crucially, as of 31 August, several critical humanitarian response sectors have received less than 15% of the funds needed to respond to the needs of millions of vulnerable people, including internally displaced people, women and children, and people with disabilities.
The Council of Ministers approved a number of measures taken to stabilize currency prices. The Cabinet gave directions to switch local incomes to the government's general budget. Directions included imposing restrictions on imports of luxury goods and benefiting from International Monetary Fund's drawing rights. At the same time, the Yemeni government is working to support central banks' measures to monitor the exchange market and money laundering. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Amid security unrest, Governor of Aden escapes car bomb assassination attack. U.S. envoy Tim Luther King discusses in Riyadh Yemen crisis with European Union ambassadors. In continuation for the war on Yemenis, Houthi imposed a filing blockade on Abdiya in Ma'rib. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.